Let me tell you something about the day I graduated that most people do not know. I walked across that stage in front of hundreds of people, shook the dean's hand, accepted the diploma I had worked 4 years and 3 jobs to earn. And when I looked out at the audience, there was not a single person there for me. Not one. No balloons. No proud parent with a camera. No sibling waving from the third row. Just empty space where my family was supposed to be. I had told myself for weeks leading up to that day that it would not hurt. I had rehearsed the not hurting so thoroughly that I almost believed it. I told myself I was past the point of needing their approval, that I had built this degree with my own hands and my own money, and my own relentless refusal to quit, and that the ceremony was just a formality anyway, just a room full of people in gowns collecting paper. I told myself all of that, and then I sat in that auditorium and looked at the empty space and felt something crack open in my chest that no amount of rehearsing had prepared me for. This is the story of what happened after that crack. What grew in it? Who found me standing alone near the exit in my graduation gown, and how that chance encounter with a complete stranger redirected the entire trajectory of my life. I did not know it at the time, of course. You never know it at the time. You were just standing there trying not to cry in public, and the rest reveals itself later. But before I tell you about her, I need to tell you about them, about my family, about what it meant to grow up in a house where ambition was treated with suspicion and education was considered something other people did. My mother worked long hours at a job she had held for 20 years without advancement and without complaint. My father had been in and out of the picture in the way that leaves permanent gaps in a child's understanding of what stability looks like. My brother was 4 years older than me and had decided by the time he was 20 that the world was rigged and effort was pointless, a conclusion he defended loudly and often. I grew up in that house absorbing the weight of those beliefs the way children absorb everything in their environment without choosing to, without realizing it is happening. But something in me resisted. Some part of me, small and stubborn and impossible to fully extinguish, kept pointing towards something different. I could not have named it when I was young. I just knew that I was not going to stay in the story I had been handed. I was going to write a different one. The problem with deciding to write a different story is that the people in your original one do not always understand why you need to leave it. And sometimes they punish you for trying. I was the first person in my immediate family to apply to college. I want you to understand what that sentence actually means, not as an abstract fact, but as a lived experience. There was no one to ask about applications or deadlines or financial aid forms. There was no one who had been through the process and could tell me what to expect or what to avoid or how to write a personal essay that sounded like myself rather than like someone performing. The idea of deserving a chance. I figured it out alone the way I'd figured out most things that mattered, through research and stubbornness and a willingness to ask questions of people I barely knew because the people I knew best had no answers to give me. My mother's response when I told her I had been accepted was not what I had imagined during the years I had spent working toward that moment. She did not cry with happiness or pull me into a hug or tell me she was proud. She asked who was going to pay for it. It was a fair question, practically speaking, but it was also the only question she asked. In the absence of everything else, it was not asking, said more, than the question itself did. I told her I had applied for financial aid and would cover the rest with work. She nodded and went back to what she was doing. That was the conversation. I carried it with me to campus 3 months later, like a small, heavy thing I had not figured out where to put down yet. College was hard in ways I had expected and hard in ways I had not. The academic work was something I could handle. I had always been good at learning, good at reading carefully and thinking clearly and producing work that reflected genuine engagement rather than just compliance. What I had not anticipated was how exhausting it would be to do all of that while working. First, it was one job, waitressing on weekends. Then it became two when tuition went up and my financial aid did not cover the difference. By my junior year, I was working 3 jobs around a full course load, sleeping less than any doctor would have recommended, running on a combination of determination and caffeine that I do not recommend to anyone, but that I also do not regret because it got me through. I called home occasionally. The calls were short and surface level in the way that conversations become when both parties have quietly agreed not to go anywhere. That might require them to feel something difficult. My mother asked if I was eating. I said yes. She said, okay. My brother rarely answered. My father was unreachable in the particular way he had always been unreachable, present enough to technically exist in my life and absent enough that his presence made no practical difference. I graduated on a Saturday in May. I sent them the date 4 months in advance. I sent a reminder 2 weeks before. I sent one more the day before. Just a simple message saying the ceremony started at 10. Nobody came. The ceremony itself was beautiful, in the way that ceremonies are beautiful when you are not inside your own head. The music, the procession, the particular gravity of a room full of people, marking something that required years to earn. I tried to be present for it. I tried to let it mean what it was supposed to mean, regardless who was or was not watching from the seats. I had earned this. Nobody could take that from me. The diploma in my hand was real. Whether or not anyone in my bloodline had shown up to watch me receive it, I told myself all of that, and I meant it, and it was. Also, not enough to fill the specific hollow that opened up when I looked out from the stage and saw only strangers looking back. After the procession ended, we were released into the lobby and the surrounding lawn. And what followed was the part one had been dreading without admitting I was dreading it. Everyone around me was immediately swallowed by their people. Parents rushing forward, siblings waving, grandparents moving carefully through the crowd with flowers and cameras, and the particular expression of people who have been waiting for this moment and feel they have earned the right to celebrate it loudly. I stood near the exit doors with my gown still on and my diploma in my hand, and I watched it all with the careful neutrality of someone who has learned to observe joy without expecting to participate in it. I was not going to cry in public. I had decided that I was going to stand here for a reasonable amount of time, and then I was going to walk to my car and drive to my apartment and allow myself to feel whatever I needed to feel in private, where nobody would see it and nobody could interpret it as evidence of the thing I refused to be, which was someone who needed rescuing. I was almost at the door when a hand touched my shoulder. I turned. She was an older woman, somewhere in her mid-60s, with the kind of composed and unhurried presence that belongs to people who stopped needing anyone's approval a long time ago. She introduced herself as Dr. Eleanor Voss. She said she had watched me during the ceremony and noticed I was sitting alone, and that she hoped I would forgive her for saying so, but that she had spent enough years in academic spaces to recognize when someone had gotten themselves there entirely on their own. She said it without pity. That was the thing that made me stay in the conversation rather than politely excusing myself. There was no performance of sympathy in her voice, no tilt of the head that signals someone is about to make you feel small by trying to make you feel seen. She just stated it plainly, the way you state facts about the weather. And then she asked me about my degree. I told her. She asked what I planned to do with it. I told her that too. She listened in a way that made me feel that what I was saying was actually landing somewhere and being genuinely considered, rather than just being received politely. We talked for 45 minutes, standing near those exit doors. At some point, the crowd around us thinned out and we moved outside to a bench on the lawn, and kept talking, still in our respective formal clothes. Me in my gown and her in a jacket that suggested she had also come from somewhere important that morning. She asked good questions, not the surface level questions that people ask when they are being polite, but the kind that require you to actually think before answering. She asked what I was most proud of from the last 4 years, not in terms of grades or achievements, but in terms of who I had become. She asked what scared me most about what came next. She asked what I would do if I knew for certain I would not fail. I had not been asked questions like that before, not by anyone who was also genuinely waiting for the answer. I found myself saying things I had not said out loud to anyone, things about the kind of work I wanted to do and the kind of life I was trying to build and the distance I was trying to put between myself and the story I had grown up inside. She listened to all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she opened her bag and took out a card and handed it to me. She said she had spent 30 years in her field and that she did not give her card to just anyone, and that she believed in being direct, so she would be direct. She said she thought I was exactly the kind of person that certain opportunities were built for, and that she knew people who were looking for exactly the kind of talent and tenacity I had just described to her, and that if I was willing to follow up, she was willing to make some introductions. I took the card. I thanked her. She said congratulations in a way that landed completely differently than the word usually does. Like she meant specifically what you have built, not just what you have received. I walked to my car holding that card and my diploma, and I sat in the driver's seat and I cried, not the hollow kind from inside the auditorium, a different kind entirely, the kind that comes when something you had stopped expecting shows up anyway, the kind that comes from being seen by someone who had no obligation to see you and chose to anyway. I called my mother that evening to tell her I had graduated. She said she was sorry they could not make it, that something had come up, that she hoped it went well. I said it did. I did not mention Dr. Voss or the card or the conversation on the bench. Some things are yours before they are anyone else's. And that afternoon belonged entirely to me. I kept the card in the front pocket of my bag for the next 3 months, and I took it out and looked at it sometimes just to confirm it was real. I emailed Dr. Voss 2 weeks after graduation. I had drafted the email 4 times before sending it because I kept making it too long, too grateful, too much. The version I finally sent was 3 short paragraphs: who I was, what I was looking for, and a genuine expression of gratitude for the conversation on the bench. She replied within 24 hours. She said she remembered me clearly and was glad I had reached out. She said she had already mentioned my name to 2 people and that she would set up introduction. Once I confirmed I was ready to move forward, I confirmed immediately. The first introduction was to the director of a mid-sized firm in my field who was looking for someone to fill a junior role that had recently opened up, Dr. Voss described me to her before I arrived, which meant I walked into that room already carrying someone else's credibility alongside my own. The interview lasted an hour. I was called back for a second one 3 days later. I was offered the position the following week. It was not the most prestigious role I could have imagined for myself. The salary was modest, and the title was junior, and there was a significant amount of work involved in proving myself to people who had not yet seen what I was capable of. But it was real, and it was mine, and it was a door that had been opened by a woman who noticed me standing alone near an exit in my graduation gown and decided that was worth interrupting her morning for. I called Dr. Voss to tell her. She said she was not surprised. She said talent combined with the willingness to work was rarer than people assumed, and that she had seen both in me within the first 10 minutes of our conversation. She asked me to keep her updated. I told her I would. I have kept that promise consistently in the years since. Not out of obligation, but because she is the kind of person who makes you want to report back. Who makes you want to become the version of yourself she saw on the bench so that you can eventually tell her she was right. I think about my family sometimes during this part of the story, about what it would have meant to have had someone like Dr. Voss in my corner from the beginning, someone who asked the right questions and opened the right doors and treated my ambition like an asset rather than an inconvenience. I do not say that with bitterness. I have done enough work on myself to understand that my mother did the best she could with what she had, and that her limitations were not cruelties, just absences. But I also think it is worth naming because I know I am not the only person who grew up in a house where nobody handed them a map. And I want those people to know that the absence of a map is not the same thing as the absence of a path. Sometimes the path shows up in the form of a stranger on a bench who asks you what you would do if you knew for certain you would not fail. 3 years into the job, I was promoted. It was not a small promotion. It was the kind that changes your title and your responsibilities and the way people look at you when you walk into a room, the kind that requires you to step into a version of yourself you have been growing toward without quite realizing it. My director called me into her office on a Thursday afternoon and told me she was recommending me for the senior position that had opened up, and that her recommendation was based not on tenure but on the consistent quality of my work and the way I handled complexity without losing my composure. She said she wanted people on her senior team who had already proven they could figure things out without being handed the answers. I thought about the 3 jobs, the financial aid forms I filled out alone, the graduation ceremony where I stood near the exit and held my own diploma and watched other people be celebrated. I thought about the email I drafted 4 times before sending. I thought about a bench on a lawn and a woman with a card in her bag who chose to interrupt her morning for a stranger. I said thank you. I went back to my desk. I sat down and I looked at my hands for a moment, and I let myself feel it. The full weight of the distance between where I had started and where I was sitting. I called Dr. Voss that evening. She picked up on the second ring. I told her about the promotion. She was quiet for a moment, and then she laughed, not with surprise, but with the particular satisfaction of someone who made bet a long time ago and has just been proven right. She said she was proud of me. Those 4 words from her landed differently than they would have from almost anyone else, because she had seen me at the exact moment when I had no evidence yet that I deserved them, and she had said them anyway. I called my mother after I called Dr. Voss. I told her about the promotion. She said that was nice. She asked if it came with a raise. I said yes. She said good, that I worked hard enough for it. That was the conversation. I held the phone after she hung up, and I noticed something that surprised me. It did not hurt the way it used to. Not because she had said the right thing, she had not, but because I had stopped needing her to somewhere in the years between the graduation ceremony and this Thursday evening phone call. I had built enough of a foundation under myself that her absence from it no longer destabilized everything above it. That is not a small thing. That is actually one of the most significant things that happened in this entire story. And it happened quietly, without announcement, as the result of years of small choices made in the right direction. Here's what I want you to take from this story. And I need you to hear it clearly because it is the part that matters most. I walked across the stage on a Saturday in May with nobody watching. That is a true and painful sentence. And I am not going to soften it because I think the truth of it is important. The people who were supposed to show up did not show up. And that hurt in a way that does not fully go away. It just becomes something you carry more gracefully over time. But here's the other true sentence. A stranger showed up instead. Not because she was obligated to, not because anyone asked her to, but because she was paying attention and she recognized something and she made a choice to act on what she saw. I have thought about that a great deal in the years since, about how much of our lives are shaped by the people who choose to pay attention at the right moment, about how a 45-minute conversation on a bench with someone I had never met before altered the trajectory of everything that followed, about how different my story would look if I had walked out that exit door before she reached me. I am not telling you that the absence of family support does not matter. It does. The gaps left by people who should have shown up and did not are real, and they take real work to fill. What I am telling you is that those gaps do not have to be permanent, that the people who are supposed to be in your corner are not always the people who share your blood, that sometimes they are strangers on benches who ask you what you would do if you knew for certain you would not fail, and then actually wait for your answer. And I am telling you something else that I think is equally important. I could have walked out that door. I almost did. I was tired and hollow, and I had been holding myself together through that entire ceremony on pure stubbornness. And I wanted nothing more than to get to my car and let it out in private. But I stayed, not because I knew what was coming, just because I was too tired to move quickly, and she reached me before I reached the door. Sometimes that is all it is. Sometimes the thing that changes your life is simply the decision to stay in the room for 5 more minutes. You do not have to know why. You do not have to feel hopeful or ready or deserving. You just have to stay. The people who needed to celebrate you and did not, that is their loss and their failure, and it belongs to them completely. Your job is not to wait for them to show up. Your job is to keep walking toward your own life so consistently and so faithfully that when the right people do show up, and they will, you're exactly where they can find you. Stay in the room, keep walking, let yourself be found.